Greetings from LA, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journeys, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2024. And that brings us to a title which actually already currently exists in the Criterion Collection physical media catalog at SPY number 306. But this year, on the occasion of this year 2024, Criterion has re-released this, but this time employing the 4K UHD format and under what is purported to be, or what is described as, a new 4K digital restoration. So we'll talk a little bit about that and other details over the course of this video discussion. This video discussion is again about a film which is designated at SPY number 306 by Criterion. It's a film which is described as being from the year 1967, and the name of the filmmaker is Jean-Pierre Melville, and the name of the work is Le Samouraï. This is the ultra iconic, ultra cool and superb work, which is described as being from the year 1967. And the name of the filmmaker, the name of the director, is Jean-Pierre Melville. And this is also screenplay credited to Jean-Pierre Melville. And the work is described as being from 1967. And among the great cast, we have Cathy Rossier and Nathalie Delon and François Perrier, and starring in, I think, in what is perhaps one of the most iconic cinema roles ever. You take one look at this image of this actor in the performance, as seen, for instance, on the cover of this particular release, and you know what I'm talking about. This is Alain Delon in the part of the main character, Jeff Costello. That's the character's name, who is heading this really brilliant, brutal, cold, calculating work, and then some. And I'm, of course, speaking of this title, which is Le Samouraï. Le Samouraï. And once again, please forgive me for my very poor pronunciation of the French language. I hope you can forgive me. I will do my very best. But if I make any mistakes, and I know I have, and I know I shall continue to make mistakes going forward, but please, I beg your I beg your pardon. I ask for your forgiveness as I try to maneuver my way through pronouncing the words of the French language. But yes, Le Samouraï. Jean-Pierre Melville's Le Samouraï returns, or I should say, comes back again, or reemerges again in the Criterion Collection physical media catalog. Again, it's SPY number 306. And I say this because Criterion has already released this work. For example, back in the DVD days, we have the older DVD. This is from some years back, several years back. And then the Blu-ray came sometime after that. So this is the Blu-ray of Le Samouraï, which is very excellent, based upon a high-definition digital restoration that was described back in the day. But here we have Le Samouraï, new 4K digital restoration. That's what it says. And also, that's how it's described. And also, among other things, interesting difference in cover art, as you can see. But there are some also similarities, specifically about the supplements that we had found in previous releases that are still carried over, wonderfully so, I should say, to this new re-release of this film. We'll speak about those points and other points a little bit later in this video discussion. But before we do, let me first try my very best to speak about the plot or story structure of this work, Le Samouraï. Again, without going into too many of the specific spoiler plot details. Again, I want to do my very best to preserve the joys and the delights and the wonderful wonderful, exciting bits, etc. I want to preserve that wonderful feeling of cinematic excitement for anyone who has not yet seen this great, great film, The Samurai. What are you waiting for? Now is your chance. It is a stellar, stellar film. Again, if we were to try to focus on the plot or story structure of this in a general way, we could talk about the role of Alain Delon, who we understand his name is Jeff Costello, and we are immediately thrust into his world in an incredibly peculiar way, very idiosyncratically, almost in a sense of a stoicism or stillness, or perhaps a kind of type of ruthless, cold and calculating manner, where things are very much laid out, both cinematically in a kind of almost linear or a very purposefully defined type of mise en scène or composition of shot type of manner, where you have the linearity of lines, sort of stoicism of shot composition. Characters are standing in one place, and there's a way in which the world is so beautifully, meticulously constructed in the hands of Jean-Pierre Melville. But this is a kind of entryway point into meeting our main character immediately, and we are also privy to the fact that this person, whose name is Jeff, is also in sort of the throes of kind of a job, because he is a hired assassin. And the hired assassin, as a kind of lone hired assassin, although there are some elements of, say, connections with other people that seem to be privy to his plan, that seem to be maybe people that Jeff, is in cahoots with. But primarily speaking, in terms of the act, in terms of the preparation to the act or acts, and he is a lone assassin. And we see him essentially the day in the life of a lone assassin, or the days in the life of a lone assassin. I think that's another way to describe this from Le Samurai. And perhaps another way to describe it is the days in the life of a lone assassin, maybe especially where on one of those days something goes not according to plan. And that maybe throws into the works some spanner or spanners that might end up potentially threatening the life and livelihood of this lone assassin, Jeff. And so that is essentially sort of the construct of the film. And so amongst that film, say, exploration, we see a very methodical approach that, again, is open to us very early on in the film, a kind of methodical approach to the preparation, the methodical approach to a type of sort of movement through space, maybe in terms of weaponry or choice of clothing, or a type of going from place to place and setting up alibis, or maybe using a particular key or set of keys in a incredibly balanced and very calculated way in order to try to achieve the step that's needed to go to the next step. And then we have a certain array of cinematic trimmings from Jean-Pierre Melville to show us the process by which this lone assassin, this hired killer, this gun for hire, is not just preparing for some kind of next job, but also preparing for it in a very thoughtful and meticulous way, and also in a very almost stoic way. But when we are confronted with this actual assassination attempt, things do not go according to plan, because part of the skill of Jeff Costello is that he's able to be pretty much incognito, which is one of perhaps the required, maybe one of the points that is part of the job description when it comes to his line of work. But when that cloak of that incognito cloak is threatened by, say, a witness to the crime that shouldn't have been there but is there, then that begins the potential of a kind of cascading of problems and dealings and situations that Jeff Costello finds himself in. For example, what to do with the witness, another example, who is still alive. For another example, how to handle the police who are hot on his trail. And this also opens up another aspect of Le Samouraï, the film, which is a cat and mouse thriller, also a police procedural, because we see the police headed by the police detective, who's portrayed wonderfully by François Perrier, superintendent, excuse me, portrayed wonderfully by the François Perrier, in a very animated way, which is such a perfect counterpoint to the cold and ultra cool stoicism of Jeff Costello in the hands of Alain Delon. But my point here is that we have this great balance, counterbalance that is essentially providing the foundation for a wonderful cat and mouse police procedural thriller. The police on the hunt for this suspect, but not quite being able to capture him, or he is evading their chase, although they do their very best. And that also sets up a number of really tense scenes that are, again, part of the milieu of the environment of Paris, which we'll also talk about in a moment. But there's some great, I'll talk about that in a second. But so there's a cat and mouse thriller aspect to it. There's a police procedural thriller aspect to it. There's also the focus on the lone assassin and the mechanics of his plot. And when, as I say, when things become threatened or threatening in terms of a witness being present when there shouldn't have been one, and how this is potentially linked to who hired Jeff Costello, and what does this mean in terms of, will he get paid, or will he also become under fire from the people higher up who hired him in the first place, and who are also under threat because things didn't go according to plan. Then what happens when the stakes become so high that his life also is potentially on the line? Now, we see in this situation where Jeff Costello, the Alain Delon character, is thus essentially being attacked, or potentially being attacked from all fronts, or major fronts. So we see his almost a stoic lone wolf type of approach and aesthetic, and perhaps a life philosophy on display in a kind of virtuoso set piece, or virtuoso set of set pieces, or set of virtuoso set pieces that really ignite the entire proceedings on a kind of cinematic fire in a very lively and exciting and vital way. All the while providing a lovely counterbalance in terms of the fire that's alight in terms of the suspense and action, but also very cold and calculating, almost glacial in terms of the cold and calculating nature of Jeff Costello, and also the way that Jean-Pierre Melville, screenwriter and director, has framed and filmed this. There is a precision to the shots. There is information that's presented almost time elongated in a way to allow for this type of presentation of the meticulous craft and nature that we see. Step A goes to step B, goes to step C, goes to step D, etc., etc., etc. And we see also what is needed on the part of Jeff Costello in order to achieve that part of step A, in order to then reach or to then graduate to the next step of step B, and then what does he need to do at step B in order to graduate to the next step of step C. And then when there is something unexpected happens, a curveball of sorts, and we know in a film like Le Samouraï there are many a curveball, we see how Jeff Costello reacts and responds. And also the pressure, as I said before, is piled on even further when we understand the police are hot on his trail. Oh my goodness. And what's going to happen? How is everything going to be resolved, if at all? What's going to happen to our, shall we say, hero or anti-hero, Jeff Costello, when we reach, or the film Le Samouraï reaches its ultimate and really very profound and thought-provoking denouement. This is the brilliant film, Le Samouraï, from the brilliant artist Jean-Pierre Melville. Wow, yeah. I should say from the outset, I'm a huge admirer of the works of Jean-Pierre Melville. I wouldn't call myself in any way an expert when it comes to Melville films or French cinema, French cinema from the 1960s, or French cinema in general. I'm not at all an expert, but I am a fan of whatever it is I've been able to watch over the course of my cinema journey life. And I've watched many a Melville film. I've been very fortunate to do so, and I've enjoyed all of those experiences in their own way. And I must say that, given that, for me, Le Samouraï is it. If I had, I wish, it's so hard to answer these questions. Or what is my favorite film from this genre, this filmmaker, etc. But if I had to answer the question for the works of Jean-Pierre Melville, I would perhaps not hesitate in naming Le Samouraï as being the answer to that question for me. This is, for me, such a iconic and cool, and as I say, glacial piece. I love how it gives us, it takes its time to show us going from A to B to C, but then suddenly there are these bursts that occur almost out of nowhere. And these things, the unexpected things that happen out of nowhere. It's almost like the image that's introduced immediately, which is the bird in the cage at the very start of the film. The bird in the cage. The cage itself is very linear and has lots of lines to it attached, but there's also activity within that could either show a type of calm, a calmness underneath, kind of quietude, or when there's some kind of frenzied action that's undertaken, there's a kind of zigzag frenzied approach within the bird cage itself. So that has that, to me, the samurai and the birdcage is the perfect, it's almost encapsulation of how I view the world of Le Samouraï and the world of Alain Delon's Jeff Costello. Speaking of which, one cannot say enough good things. I think there are. I think I don't know if one must. I would parade as many accolades as I can when I'm speaking about Alain Delon's performance here, but I don't know if I have time to say as much of the laudatory remarks that I do want to say about it. But let me just say here in brief that this is, for me, one of the most. It's like. It's like, okay, if someone asked me what is the Criterion Collection, I think perhaps for me a number of images just immediately get conjured up in my mind, just almost by instinct. Okay, so if someone says the Criterion Collection, what is the Criterion Collection? So I can think in my mind a number of images. For maybe one image might be the image from the Japanese film Hausu. Another image might be Seven Samurai, and then yet another image would be Alain Delon's Jeff Costello in Le Samouraï, which is right here, together with the coat. Sometimes he's got the tan-colored trench coat, and also he's got the dark coat or the dark clothes, which is so iconic. We've got the brimmed hat, which is iconic, and we've got the killer's what's the phrase? The killer's accoutrement that are also part of the veneer exterior. When he's getting ready for the kill, what does he wear but white gloves, which has its own ominous ring to it? The close-ups on the gun, almost fetishistically so, and also at the same time revealing a kind of coolness of exterior, and whether or not this anti-hero that we come to know is himself capable of a kind of subject of our sympathy or empathy, or maybe that is totally beyond. He's beyond salvation because we are privy to what it is he is doing, or perhaps by the very nature of the chaos that erupts or potentially erupts over the course of the story of the samurai, maybe is there room for some kind of salvation, however scant or however ephemeral it might be. And you be the judge of that watching the film The Samurai. But the point is that there is much food for thought that I think the performance of Alain Delon and the filmmaking parameters set up by Melville provide. There is a kind of likable quality to him. We are in a great, almost a cinematically uncanny way. We tend to root for him, even though we know that what he is doing is quite. I mean, in a sort of extreme way of putting it, beyond the pale, morally speaking. But there is almost a seductive nature to the cool exterior. That again, it's part of the accoutrement, as well as the way that Melville and Delon and others apply this kind of ultra cool Paris French maybe Nouvelle Vague soulfulness to the film on the one hand, but also providing a kind of a stoic metaphor for stoicism in the form of the samurai, with the title "Le Samurai." Also, the way the film opens references and allusions to a samurai, and sort of which is maybe providing the possibility from a viewer's point of view of interpreting one possible philosophical pathway of Alain Delon's Jeff Costello as a kind of a stoic loner that is derived from, or otherwise finding a kind of philosophical basis in, the way of the samurai, as it's perceived by Melville and Delon and Jeff Costello and others, which itself is an interesting turn in terms of of I don't want to say culture, maybe appropriation isn't the right word, but a type of a cultural homage, if you will, using the sort of the veneer exterior of the samurai, but internalizing it and making it its own in this kind of a Parisian way, which I think is a brilliant conceit. Speaking of Paris and the environment, this is another great, exciting aspect of this film. Le Samouraï, how Paris is shown, or how the city, the central parts and the outskirts, the interiors and exteriors, how they're shot and shown. There's some great nightclub scenes, both in sort of the central area of the nightclub and also the back rooms. And you get a sense of the streets. Almost daily, day-to-day lighting, almost everyday type of feel to, which I think is itself a very extraordinary aspect. And some things like walking across a footbridge that itself might seem very mundane in the ordinary course of sort of maybe a Parisian city living, but in the context of the samurai, it's a kind of an exciting duel to the death type of environment, which is so brilliant. Plus, also the metro, the train system is also very key aspect. Not just the trains themselves, but also the walkways and the stairs and going up and down and the like. This is all part of the environment, the milieu, against which, the backdrop against which Jeff Costello and others, François Pellier, superintendent, and others really are performing their wonderful circus parade um, of delights and cinematic suspense. So this is an ultra cool film, and it is very methodical, and it is very exacting, and it is quite. Um, I think it's a film too that has almost a sense of it has a sense of bravura, but it also knows a way to show that. I mean, it's not overly flashy. Let me put it that way. There's a, a, a kind of there is a certain there's a definite style to the film, but that style I wouldn't say is something that, well, I mean, it's not a style that overcomes the substance of the film. I mean, on the contrary, it's very much going hand in hand with the substance of the film. One can say in many ways the Melville style here, it's as cold and calculating and precise as the character of Jeff Costello himself, which I think is a perfect mirror. And so in many ways, the character itself is the embodiment of the very style, the cinematic style in which the character is being portrayed, which is, and the more I think about it, the more I realize how genius that is. So um, this is, I think, yeah, again, it is, if I had to answer the question, it would, yeah, my favorite Melville film, A Samurai, would be it, for the reasons that I've tried to allude to right now, and then some. This is a really exciting film. It's been part of the Criterion Collection for a long time, very rightly so, as well as other Melville films. Not all, but most of them find a really nice representation in the Criterion Collection physical media catalog. So, if you have a chance to watch Le Samurai, I strongly recommend it. And if you have a chance to watch other Melville films, you are in for a real treat. And you certainly are if you decide to watch this one. This is one of the greats. This is Le Samurai. The Criterion Collection has re-released this film, Le Samurai, courtesy of what is described as a new 4K digital restoration. Excuse me. Released it on the occasion of this year, 2024, which is what I have here in front of me. This has two discs: the 4K UHD disc and also the Blu-ray disc, and we'll be talking about the Blu-ray disc as well when we talk about the supplements. I have the 4K disc in the machine right now, and let me use this opportunity to talk about what the master is. And I've also removed the booklet, the staple booklet. Hurrah, hurrah for the staple booklet. I love it. Because it has a lot of pages that we can have associated with this, and a lot of reading materials as well with the booklet. But one of the points I like to mention here is on page 26 of this booklet. At the top it says, about the master, and I quote, "Le Samouraï is presented in the aspect ratio of 1.85 to 1. This new 4K restoration undertaken by the Criterion Collection in Pathé was created from the 35mm original camera negative, in addition to a 35mm internegative and 35mm interpositive for some sections. The original monaural soundtrack was remastered from the 35mm magnetic track. The feature is presented in HDR, high dynamic range on the 4K Ultra HD disc, and high definition SDR, standard dynamic range on the Blu-ray." Excuse me. So I should point out that the earlier Blu-ray, which was from 2017, was also based upon the high definition digital transfer earlier. So this is the earlier release. We had the earlier DVD from 2005, and then this emergence of the Blu-ray based upon that several years later. This was and the earlier releases were always a high definition release. But now we have what is purported to be a new 4K digital restoration. So they are different in terms of presentation. What can I say about this? I really like both versions. Let me put it this way. I don't know if I would call, and I don't mean this as a knock against this film, but let me try to explain. I wouldn't call what I see with this 4K restoration. It doesn't. I'm not sure if it's definitive. It's really excellent. It is really, really excellent. But there are some noticeable differences. At least I've caught that. Sometimes I might want to prefer this version. Sometimes I felt like, oh, I also want to go back to this version and see how I feel, what my reaction or response is, maybe psychologically, as I watch this. And here's some examples. So there are some scenes in Le Samouraï, especially some interior, indoor scenes, where when I saw it on the earlier Blu-ray, on the DVD and the Blu-ray, the high def version or the presentation, they felt like they were in a certain period of day, like I don't know, like they felt a little bit brighter, or there was a little bit more sunshine. I'm not sure, but here those same scenes in the Samouraï, the 4K restoration, they feel like later in the day or later at night, almost like early evening hours or something like that, which is really fascinating. I never thought about that, but there is almost like this is an example. I don't want to say it's darker. Well, I guess it is. There are moments where this film, there are scenes that feel noticeably darker. That it's not to say that the objects in the frame are any less pronounced. On the contrary, they seem just as well pronounced and visible in this new digital presentation than ever, which is really wonderful. But there's this interesting way. I mean, this is a film, Le Samouraï, that on certain viewings, I feel like it is a film that is just it's perfectly encapsulated in scenes of darkness, which I think is so wonderful. It has that visual motif of darkness and nighttime, etc. So in that sense, I respond to those scenes in the 4K when I watch the 4K very, very positively. But also, it's the film that's not always set in darkness. There are very purposefully so daytime scenes, outdoor scenes that are very bright and very much iconic. And so this is a film that I think, for me, from a subjective viewpoint, exists in sunlight. It also exists in nighttime darkness. So depending on how I feel, sometimes I might want to see the darker, visually darker version, or the one that has a slightly brighter feel, which is my general take on the earlier Blu-ray. Not to say that one is better than the other, but that's something that's fairly noticeable. Not for all scenes, but for some key crucial scenes. So that's one thing. Also, I would say that there is maybe in keeping with the 4K restoration or master's tendency towards maybe highlighting darkness. There is a sensibility about it that feels very coolish, maybe blue, not overly so, but there's a kind of coolish blue sense about it, which I think is also very, I respond very positively to that, very much so. But it is also, I think, a very, I find therefore that I look at the Samurai, this new version, maybe as a maybe nocturnal might be a bit too strong, but the point is it's edging towards viewing the world as a kind of nocturnal cinematic experience, which I think is a possible, it's a great way of viewing it. That's not how I've always viewed Le Samurai in terms of my viewings, relying on the previous Blu-ray or DVD versions, the high definition transfer versions of the past. So it's a kind of I don't want to say learning curve, but there is maybe a nuanced, subtle distinction that I have. Now, that's why I said at the outset, I don't know which one I prefer. Do I prefer this in terms of the daylight trimmings being fairly intact, or do I prefer the slightly more nocturnally edged version that I would probably classify this new restoration as? It's difficult for me to tell. Because I can't make a choice doesn't mean that I dislike this version. On the contrary, I like it very, very much. I very much do. And I wouldn't call it a drastically different version than what we have before, and I don't want to give that impression. But there are some slight, if still noticeable, differences that could vary, create some kind of variance of impression in terms of how one is watching Le Samurai. And indeed, if one thinks of Le Samurai as a kind of more nocturnal film, then that does possibly affect one's interpretation of the motives and the whole world of Le Samurai, which I think that's a fine possibility. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing at all. It's a really great thing, potentially. So it's, I think, your choice, and it's up to you as a viewer of this film and as a fan of this film. I think maybe some fans of Le Samurai might prefer the other versions, the other restorations or the other presentations, while others will applaud this. I don't look at it as a kind of I wouldn't regard this as being perhaps any kind of point of controversy in terms of how something has been maybe changed drastically from what previous versions have been like. I wouldn't put that in that. I wouldn't put this restoration in this category at all. At all. So I don't want to give that impression. But there are some potential differences that could, let me say, potentially expand the conversation about what one's viewpoints of the samurai are in I think also potentially a very positive way, while still retaining the great or reminding us of what really worked with previous releases. So I find that a very potentially positive thing, and so I'm very happy about this. I'm still glad I have my earlier Blu-ray. Don't get me wrong, but I'm very, very happy too that I have this new 4K restoration. Now I have the Blu-ray disc in the machine. So once again, you have the film on the 4K UHD disc and also the Blu-ray. But if you want to go to the supplements, you're going to have to go to the Blu-ray. And so that's why I've put the Blu-ray in the machine behind me right now. And as you can see, it's also got the same logo and the same image of Alain Delon as part of the Blu-ray menu or the 4K UHD menu. So that's very cool. We'll talk a little bit more about the other the aspects of the packaging and the images and the cover art and as well a little bit later. But before that, let's go to the supplements. As you can see, or maybe you can't because my presentation skills are very bad as always. I apologize. I'm so bad when it comes to YouTube video making. I hope you can forgive me, but let me do my best. So you have the movie and timeline and chapters. I like the timeline inclusion there. And then subtitles. And then the second from the bottom is supplements. The supplements that we find here are all from previous releases, so that's really good. I don't detect anything new. In other words, on the occasion of this 2024 release by Criterion, I don't see anything that, at least I understand, I don't think anything is new. Everything has been what we've seen in previous Criterion releases. So that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad. It would have been interesting and nice to have had maybe something additional on the occasion of this 2024 release, but I don't want to knock anything that we've had before. And as I'm very maybe it's the way I look at it, but I really think that what we had before is great. So let's focus on these supplements again. We've had them before, but we have them again. So please check them out because what we had before was great, and so what we're having again, therefore, is great because it's the same. First up, we have what's called Authors on Melville. And so when I select it, there are two authors that are selected. So we have two interviews with authors who are film critics and also historians and also experts in Melville. They've written about Melville in their own capacities, which is described here very briefly. So let me quote here. Melville à Melville, critique Rui Nogueira's 1971 book of interviews with Jean-Pierre Melville was for decades the only English language work dedicated to the director's films. In 2003, cinema historian Jeanette Vincendeux added Jean-Pierre Melville, an American in Paris, to that short list. In these interviews from 2005, the two authors share their thoughts on Le Samouraï. So these are two experts and great fans and admirers, and so filled with knowledge, and have written about Melville as it's mentioned here. So we have both of their perspectives here in one-on-one interviews. So you can select either one for your, which is great here. So the first up is the Melville author and historian and colleague, right? Louis Nogueira's interview it's about 13 minutes. And what he says here is really wonderful. He calls, for example, Le Samouraï, he describes it as, for instance, the most perfect, purest, and noblest film, which I think are really great adjectives to use. Perfect, which is maybe also a way to remind us of the almost the stoicism in which it's framed and the items within the composition of shots is arranged and edited as well. And then pure in terms of almost a distillation of a shot, countershot, and motion, which is an editing, which is the very essence of a kind of cinema grammar of say French cinema or cinema writ large, that is very not just fashionable but very much part of the kind of commanding cinema grammar, and also noble, and maybe the nobility or grace. Of a kind of the stoicism, linked to the Le Samouraï spirit, I think, is also part of this. And again, the style of that is infused with this composition of shots and editing and cinematic side, which is also linked inextricably with the way the characters portrayed. So this is in many ways I mean, it's the one of the great distillations of how to describe Le Samouraï. Also talking about Nogueira goes into details about Melville's style and approach. This was shot on location, location shooting. So Paris is also displayed in a very effective way. The budget was relatively small, according to what's said here. And also, this film had come in a very difficult point in Melville's life, which we'll talk a little bit about as part of the supplements later. But a huge fire really damaged greatly studio Genet, and so that really hit him. And so according to Nogueira's commentary here, Melville was suffering a lot, and that there was the fatality was a bird at the fire, but that also perhaps that's mentioned here because, as we know, the bird in the cage is also a very key element of the film, and also the character of Jeff Costello himself. Also, too, speaking of admiration of this film, comments are made here about Paris at night in particular. There's some wonderful night shots. I also would add to that the daytime shots as well. And again, what's such a great comment here. Everything is great that's mentioned here, but for example, the seemingly mundane and unextraordinary becomes so extraordinary in the film The Samouraï. And case in point, there's a famous scene involving a kind of bridge or footbridge path, and two characters have to meet, and it becomes this huge almost showdown moment, potentially so. It's a very, I mean, I don't know Paris. I've been to Paris just as a visitor, but I can't claim to know the neighborhoods or the landmarks at all. So I don't know the geography one bit, but what is stated here is that this is apparently a very seemingly just almost ordinary place from a city living perspective, but in this film it becomes this grand dual type of location, which is again very much in keeping with how one can look at Le Samouraï and the way it treats Paris, the city, turning the very ordinary into the extraordinary, which I think is in many ways a type of wonderful mission statement for cinema itself. I'm not sure, but and so. There's a kind of love for the city, which is very much part of Samurai. If anything, it's also could be described as being a city about Paris. About there are those wonderful films made by certain filmmakers about set in a location, Rome or Tokyo or say New York, etc., and they become say New York films or Rome films or something like, or other uh, say large cities of anywhere across the globe. Well, this could be said to be, I think, very much a film about the city as well as anything else. So it's a great comment to be had. And also how the role of Jeff Cosell was essentially written for Delon. And you had to wait a little bit in terms of scheduling before Delon became available. But and speaking of the performance, there's an interesting detail about how the film ends, and a kind of performance detail with regard to Delon's performance. And so it does reveal the ending of the film. So I'll refrain from saying anything more about that for the benefit of those who have not yet seen the film. But suffice to say, it's a very interesting detail that comes. I mean, I've seen this interview before many times, but let me just say that it's included here again. So it's worth checking out if you don't know this little detail that's revealed here. Very interesting about how certain performance trait was captured or not as this things might have proceeded. But in any event, this is a great interview discussion. So that's the first interview here of the authors on Melville. The second is with Jeanette Vincent. This is approximately 18 minutes. It's also one-on-one interview with her. She mentions here, among other things too, for instance, the background of Melville, how Melville was someone who is, in essence, as she describes it, it's very fascinating, educated himself by watching movies. And what I think she means by that is that he watched so many films as growing up, and just learned about cinema, it seems, from watching them. And so this is in many ways a kind of precursor, as she describes it, to the very famous figures of the French Nouvelle Vague or New Wave. People like Jean-Luc Godard or François Truffaut and others would be so proud of the fact that they were watching so many movies, which they claimed to be part of their own filmmaking education. And so this kind of approach to watching cinema, a cinephile's life, in many ways, setting up a person to become a filmmaker themselves, could be said to be its own sort of precursor to the French New Wave. So I think that lends itself to the possibility of considering Melville, maybe generationally speaking, maybe he might be, he might be part of the New Wave. He might be considered a little bit aloof from the New Wave. He might be considered the father of the New Wave, or maybe some other connections, however close or however tenuous, depending on sort of the viewpoint of what one considers a Nouvelle Vague. But in any event, there is a strong connection in terms of sort of cinematic inspirations, and also how Melville was very much an auteur, independent cinema filmmaker. I mean, if you're talking about independent filmmaking, Melville can be considered to be, again, very much in many senses of the phrase, the patron saint of kind of independent filmmaking spirit in France and Paris, speaking about how he made films in his own studio, etc. And also about a film, this Le Samouraï. And in most of Melville's films, according to Vincent Dup, Melville focuses shines his cinematic light on a kind of exploration in various guises and forms of a type of masculinity. And a masculinity examined, dissected, maybe even commented upon, maybe critiqued. But in any event, it's dissected in that way, in the form of a style that has upon its foundations the principles of control and precision and a type of minimalism. Um, and let's see, and also going along with that, talking about some of the other actors that Melville has worked with. Vincent Du mentions among those some of the among those examples, Jean-Paul Belmondo and also Alain Delon, and how Belmondo, in a number of films that Belmondo featured for Melville, had a certain acting style that could be said to be quite animated, whereas Delon, in a film like Le Samouraï, is very controlled, and the phrase is minimalist. I think the phrase she uses for Belmondo is a very mobile actor, whereas Delon has a very minimalist approach. And so in that way, a character like Jeff Costello, it's written perfectly for an actor like Delon. And also, she brings up the point too how the superintendent or the inspector, Perrier, portrayed by François Perrier, has his own animated style, which in turn is very much counterpunctual, or very much a great counterpoint to the minimalism of Jeff Costello. So that's really really great. Also, she speaks about the possible potential inspirations. She says it's not quite clear, but but possibly one or more inspirations for Le Samouraï for Melville could have been another film, which is called This Gun for Hire, a very famous film noir film. And also the what she calls to the elegance and iconography of the samurai warrior, and sort of focus on ritual, which is very much part of the Jeff Costello persona, which almost has a very religious connotation. You know, rituals can be associated with sort of a way of life or process or procedure that could be related to the sort of samurai warrior code, which itself almost has this militaristic attitude about it, which also it could be said to be very much part of a religious or religious based philosophy in terms of the importance of ritual in order to achieve certain goals. And also, Vincent mentions too how Melville takes the opportunity with his mise en scène, the composition, to, in a way, and I love this, exercise in an examination of decomposition of gangster elements. Now, this is a fascinating observation. I mean, this entire conversation, these conversations are all fascinating, but one example is how almost Melville, I mean, he shoots in a way that is very much seemingly very much in keeping with a kind of illusion of reality, namely, shot A then leads naturally to shot B, and it's timed in a way that shot A and shot B, the relationship temporally is that it's a continuation of time and a natural progression of time. But in fact, what Vincent mentions is that this is not always the case in Melville's filmmaking style of Le Samouraï. Case in point, there's a scene involving a gun being revealed and a shootout, but it seems like the close-up on one gun or another is done in a way that it kind of skews the point of a sort of linear chronology. It wouldn't have been possible had this occurred in real time. In other words, a shot happens and it almost elongates time at that moment. So the point that she's making here for this great point is that Melville is almost sacrificing a type of reliance on strict linear and the impression of linear time passage. He is sacrificing this in favor of using his close-up or using the camera to, in a sense, elongate or maybe even focus in on a sort of element of gangsterism that is, again, that focus is emphasized more than, say, the reliance on the preservation of the illusion of quote-unquote passage of real time, which is a fascinating thing about Melville. It's almost like the act of cinema deconstruction takes precedence above anything else, which I think is another great alternative way to describe Melville's cinema. And then, too, speaking a bit about the critical success of this film and the commercial success of this film. Now, this is also very important for Melville, and that goes towards his success again as an independent filmmaker. So, There's a lot to chew on. There's a lot of great commentary. Everything is great about these two perspectives in their own ways. So you've got to check these out if you can. So these are the authors on Melville section with 2 interviews. So it's really great. So that's the first main supplement section or supplement hub section here. So the next is the lineup. You press this, and we've got a number of things. And it says here, and I quote, Director Jean-Pierre Melville and actors Alain Delon, Nathalie Delon, Cathy Rossier, and François Perrier discuss the filmmaker's style, acting, and Le Samouraï in this collection of archival interviews, running 24 minutes total. These excerpts, courtesy of the Institut National de l'Audiovisuel in Paris, or Paris, were originally broadcast on French television between 1967 and 1982. So there's a lot here. So totaling 24 minutes according to the Criterion Collection. There's also an index. So you press the index, you can see there are 6 sections. So the first section is Jean-Pierre Melville, which is let's see, yeah, so this is described as being from 1970. And Jean-Pierre Melville here is he's seen kind of picking up a telephone call at one point. It's either a real telephone call or it's a staged telephone call. I can't really tell. It could be either. In either case, it's quite fascinating. But he's also in different rooms or different situations talking about the cinema growing up, writing and editing being parts of the filmmaking process he particularly enjoys. He talks about explorations of the gangster life in his film The Samurai. He's also asked how much does he ponder death a lot, and it's fascinating to hear his response, among other things too. And again, Jean-Pierre Melville, he's his own demeanor and his own presence, very suave, his voice has almost like a cool, soothing, like menthol or honey type of vibe to it, which is really fascinating. So that's Jean-Pierre Melville. That's the first one. Next is Fire at Rue Genet Studio. Which is described as being from 1967. So this is the fire that was alluded to in the one of the author interviews. That was really a low point. There was a huge fire at the studio near where he lived that destroyed, that had created a great deal of damage. And this is a sort of news broadcast or of a sort that which shows what happened or the scene afterwards. It also has Jean-Pierre Melville interviewed a little bit, and so he talks a little bit about what happened as far as he understands it, where the fire actually began in the first place, and it goes into a really interesting line of questioning about what could have happened or how could have this caused, and is it possible that this might have been arson or something? And Jean-Pierre Melville says he doesn't rule that out as a possibility. And then that goes into a discussion about how much success he has had as a filmmaker and as in terms of his own independent studio during a time where French cinema has been struggling. And so while he doesn't make any direct claims or any direct accusations, he does suggest the possibility of maybe that there might have been something fishy going, but it doesn't go beyond that. But he also talks too about how this really doesn't damage him in terms of his plans going forward, in terms of his own current filmmaking plans. So he's very defiant, and also he's very calm. But it's also a big deal. This is a very serious situation that has happened to him. But then we get a little bit of that here. So this is the fire at his studio. Next is Alain Delon. This is described, I think, as being from 1967. And he's talking here about working, it's kind of a talk show appearance type of place. He's talking about Le Samouraï. He's also asked to describe this and working with Melville, and he has this brilliant way of describing. Melville is, for him, one of the greatest directors, and so comments about Jean-Pierre Melville is this great respect that he has, and this great presence too. It's wonderful. So that's the Alain Delon section, and then Nathalie Delon is also interviewed next, and from '68, and this has a. She's talking, for instance, about roles and the types of roles that she would like to have, and also the fears and risks of being typecast, which is an interesting line of questioning as well. and also talking about the profession of acting too. And she has a very, I mean, in terms of running time, it's relatively small in the grand scheme of Le Samouraï, but very, very important in the course of the film, and the relationship between her and Jeff Costel, and also the relationship between Alain Delon and Nathalie Delon as well. So there's that. Also, next is Cathy Grossier. This is described as being from 70, and here she's speaking. She plays a very, very key role in this film. Cathy Grossier. I mean, according to the credits, yes, the pianist, Valerie the pianist. So, which is a key role. And I'll say nothing more again for those who haven't seen this film. But she speaks here about her sort of experience and her background and coming to this role, the world of cinema acting, and also her sort of ambitions and maybe plans in terms of acting further, theater, etc. Talking about her background and her family descriptions. So this is really great. And then last but not least, we have Francois Perrier, who is he portrays the inspector superintendent role, and talking here about certain aspects of sort of the darkness. So this is really great. So the lineup, which is a neat way of titling this little section of the supplement. So you've got that. So a bunch of archival interviews, and they're all in their own way. Very informative and very telling. So please check that out if you can. Then we have Melville Delon, d'honneur et de nuit. And this is the following short documentary, directed by Olivier Boller in 2011, explores the close friendship between director Jean-Pierre Melville and actor Alain Delon and their iconic collaboration, Le Samouraï. It features interviews with Melville's nephews Laurent Grousset and Rémi Grumbach, critic Rui Nogueira, and filmmaker Volker Schlondorf. So this is again the key relationship, or one of the key relationships in the world of Melville, is that the professional working relationship between him and Delon, and perhaps Le Samouraï is the greatest embodiment of that. There are other films that are mentioned here, Flic and Le Soc Rouge, etc. This is really great. Of Honor and of Night, I think that's the way that the title is. Don't know how to do it. And so it goes into many of the sort of the aspects of the filming and the style. There's sort of multifacets to this, which, I mean, these have been touched on before, but it's great to to visit these points or revisit these points of the hard compromising, hard-boiled edge to the film on the one hand, but then there's also this police procedural aspect on the other, and the soft side, if you will, is also portrayed, as well as other points. So, and then again expressed in the form of sort of Melville's art and Delon's art, respectively. So. Melville of Honor and of Night. So that's also included as a short documentary. Very worthwhile. Please check that out if you can. And then last but not least, we have the trailer, which rounds out the discussion points here. So the supplements are really great, again, which is what we've had before. But if you are, again, to my understanding, we don't have anything new on the occasion of this new release. 2024 release. That's okay, as I mentioned before. It's great to have these supplements as they were before. So I'm very happy as is. It would have been nice to have had other things, but I'm very happy as is. I've seen these supplements so many times. Not to say that I remember everything. I try to, but I always forget a lot of things. I have to watch them again to remind myself or try to take notes. But there is so much to learn from and jump off from here if you are ever more curious about the world of Melville and the world of the Samouraï, Delon and others. It's a great place to go. It's also a great place to jump off from for even more further additional exploration on your part. But again, these are the supplements that are part of the Criterion release for Le Samouraï. So now let me just continue or conclude my conversation here by talking about some other aspects of the physical media release of this. So let me go with the look of this. So the cover art is different and the font is different. I'm holding in my hands here the earlier Blu-ray release, which is patterned after the yet earlier DVD release. as you can see here, the backs are slightly different. There's not an image here, but there, you can look at the back of the DVD. There's an image on the back of the DVD, the older DVD, and that's a key point in the film. This image, in fact, while not on the it's not on the back of the Blu-ray, it does find itself in one of the parts of the Blu-ray, the older Blu-rays. I'm sorry, not the Blu-rays booklet, excuse me, but the interior of the Blu-ray itself. If you look at this, is the older Blu-ray, which is the part of the inner sleeve. The older Blu-ray, or the older release, had, among other things, a neat little motif. You see that there? That's the disc of the older Blu-ray from several years back, and there's a little white thing here, which is a bird, which is a really cool thing of inclusion, as well as this image. I like this image very much that's used for the new release of Le Samouraï, as well as a similar type of image and font, Le Samouraï, for the booklet cover. But this is the older Blu-ray booklet for just some context. But if I had to choose, I would probably say, I mean, they're both very minimalist in their own ways. And perhaps the darker cover of this new release is maybe in keeping with my comments about how I felt about the presentation, the 4K presentation, and what leaned towards darker and more nocturnal in some scenes. So that's maybe it's an interesting, I don't know, maybe it's by coincidence, I'm not sure. This is the lighter version and the darker version. I don't know if that's why I look at it that way. I don't see any bird motif included in the new release. It's nice when you catch it here and there in the old release, that bird motif. You ate my bird. What? That's not from Le Samouraï. Guess what film that's from? But anyway, let's see. What was I saying? But in any event, so that's the artwork or selection of the cover art design. I should just point out very, very quickly the art director Sarah Habibi, Eric Skillman, menu and packaging design Polly Bidman, art production coordinator William Brace, print production artist Craig Phillips, art assistant Julie Sussman. So I don't know. I do like the little extra bits when you see in the background of the inner sleeve, etc., from the older Blu-ray. By the way, you don't get any background image, at least as far as I can tell. No, I mean, you get this sort of gray-blue thing on the back here, but none of the image. So I mean, take your pick. Which do you prefer in terms of the inner sleeve? I mean, these are very minor points, I understand, in the grand scheme of things. But you know, it's always nice to catch these these little Easter eggs or nuggets when you can, I suppose. But that doesn't mean that I'm totally out of favor with the way that the new release looks. So, but that's just my 2 cents there. But also, if we go to the booklet, again, kudos for keeping the staple booklet format of Le Samourai's insert. The older Blu-ray also had the staple booklet, which is great. And the essays or the writings are the same. The great essay by David Thompson, Death in White Gloves, and then also John Woo's The Melville Style, Cahiers du Cinéma, and also Melville on Le Samouraï, as well as some images to boot. I should point out just some very, very minor things. The font that they use is a little bit different in this new booklet than they use for the older, say, Blu-ray booklet. As you can see right there, that's an example of the first page of the first essay, the Thompson essay, Death in White Gloves, for the older Blu-ray booklet, whereas this is the same essay, but you can see a different presentation. And I actually like the font, very, very minor point. I like the font of the new booklet rather than the old booklet. And it's a little bit too, it's a little bit, the old font, or the old booklet font is a little bit too, what's the phrase, a little bit too sans serif for my taste. But it's okay. It's still a very respectable, I don't know what the font name is, but it's still very respectable, I think. But in any event, again, that's a very, very minor point. But please check out these writings if you can. My strong suggestion, excuse me, is, as always, watch the film first, at least once. And after that, you can read all of the great essays and writings here, which have been carried over from the earlier release as well. So that concludes. Oh, and I should point out, too, that the discs, the 4K disc, which is on top here, and the Blu-ray, which is bottom. The Blu-ray is a slightly grayer, darker look to it, or in terms of the disc themselves, the physical disc themselves, whereas the 4K has a slightly lighter gray tone to it. So different, but noticeable. I should say it's different, so therefore, so it's slightly different, but still noticeable. There we go. I should also end on one other thing, which is, I've mentioned maybe my general preferences in terms of some of the images. Maybe I overall might prefer, say, the older Blu-ray than the newer release, but I don't want to take away from, I think, the cool trimmings and stylings that's being evoked here. But let me just point out, it's really nice. I do admire and appreciate how, when Criterion makes a release like this, remember, it is a re-release of a film that currently exists in the Criterion Collection physical media catalog. It is often the case that when Criterion does this, they will rely on the same cover art. Now, that's the same. When I say the same cover art, that might seem a bit. I might sound quite demeaning, and I don't mean to sound that way. But I apologize for using the phrase. But please, I don't mean to sound demeaning on that part, because I understand a lot of effort that goes into choosing the art and the artwork, etc. But my point is that it's always a very exciting, extra enticing thing. It's not always easy for a consumer to make the choice whether or not to purchase a title that they might already have. So it's very possible that someone might already have Le Samouraï, and they might really love the Blu-ray that they have, say this older Blu-ray release. And so sometimes maybe there might be some bits of enticement for any new release, for instance, a new something that is maybe a new presentation or maybe new supplements, etc. Other times, maybe there might not be any other differences, except it's a new release. It's based on the same master, but purporting or relying on, say, the vessel of 4K UHD disc technology, etc. Really depends on the release. It's case by case. Here, my understanding is that we have the same supplements, but we have a different presentation or different master elements. So that is one, I think, very strong enticement to go with the new, or to purchase the new 2024 release of The Samurai. And even something that might be maybe, for some, I mean, for some I know it's a big deal. For others, might be, relatively speaking, it's not the be all. It's not the breaking point, or it's not the in terms of whether or not to purchase an item. For some it is. For some it might not be. But the point is that it's always nice when Criterion, whenever they release a film that is even very recently part of their physical media catalog, it's always nice when they do a re-release with a different cover art, like they did here with the Samurai release. I do appreciate and admire that. Again, not to take away anything from the previous artworks, but it's always nice to have a different choice. So I do appreciate that very much. Variety is the spice of life, as they say. So, anyway, there's that little thing. I mean, it happened too, for instance, with the. It doesn't happen with all the Criterion 4K releases of titles that already exist in the Criterion Collection physical media category. Once in a while, it does. One thing that comes to mind is the Renoir film. Rules of the Game. That was also one where Criterion already had this film in its physical media catalog, but then upon the 4K re-emergence of the title, they actually relied on different artwork. So that was really cool, I thought. But then this is a similar type of, or same type of phenomenon, which is very cool indeed. I admire that very much. Sorry, I've been talking too long. I apologize. Let me end it here, or just close up by saying, this is such a cool film. This is such a cool film. So cool, so suave, just ultra cool to the max. This is your opportunity to check it out if you haven't already done so. This is Jean-Pierre Melville's film, Le Samouraï. All right, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great movies, such as Le Samouraï, such as other films by Jean-Pierre Melville, such as other films in the Criterion Collection, and beyond. So until we see each other again, my dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers. Salut.